for the front brakes, it's pretty basic. This install is, pretty basic hand tools. There's two funky things you need. First off, you need a punch to get the pins out. Typical, very normal for a Brembo style front caliper. And then the caliper bolts are a E-Torx E16. So I think that's the first I've seen of that, but it's a weird socket, so you're obviously going to need that before you start. Other than that, I think it was a M6 for the little hold down bolt. So all we're going to do is punch out the pins, wiggle the pads out with the cross spring, etc. While the caliper is still attached, we're going to lever the pistons back into the caliper on both sides. You can buy a fancy $300 Girodisc tool, or you can do it with pretty much any blunt object, including the brake pad. Again, this is a track install, we're not driving the car for 3 years through the winter. We're not going to grease the hub. We're going to make sure it's clean and dry and free of any major debris, but this isn't a 3-year install. The brakes come on and off this car once or twice a season, more than likely, so we don't have to worry about that. Anyway, knock the pins out, get the pads out, pistons retracted, 2 bolts on the caliper on the back side. They're kind of hard to get to, probably a pretty fair torque number there, 100-ish foot-pounds or so. Get this rotor screw out. Everything reverses, and literally I could have probably done it in the amount of time I just took. So, all right, so pretty easy. Get these pins out. You can hold the spring down. It's got a little detent there. A little bit of pressure to get the pad some wiggle room. And if we do it right, there we go. That was pretty easy. So that's just a cross spring. In this case, they're symmetrical, so there's no right way. And again, these pads are fairly thick, so we don't have to get the pistons too far back in, but there, they just went back in. And before I even bother with the other side, with luck, it'll slide right in. All right, there you go. Then take your slightly thinner than full thickness pad on this side, because when I pushed them back here, it probably put them in there, which it did, but I can grab it. See if that works. So that probably saves you $300, because this pad shape made that quite easy. So there you go. Good news is, bad news is we're not done yet. But the pistons are back, and that's done. So now we can move on to the next step, which is going to take a little muscle, caliper off. That's tighty, lefty loosey. All right, so yeah, these weird E-Torx bolts, no big deal. Just wanted a couple notes. We've done a bunch of Brembos. I don't have a Supra. This is Nate's, but very typical. Maybe not so much on a, good weather street car, but whoopsie. I don't see, when I see Camaros and Corvettes, they have a lot of Loctite or whatever from the factory. It makes kind of backing them out take a minute. This does not have that. It may be torque to yield as well. I mean, I don't know. I've taken my Corvette bolts off my car 25 times and I still lived. So, but the other thing is, it's a steel bolt into an aluminum caliper. I don't know why Brembo does that, but on Subarus and some of these cars that see a lot of winter weather and extended time that the calipers on the car, these threads can come out, and yeah, time certs and all that. Yeah, it's not a lot of fun, but just be prepared. If you drive through a lot of rain or salt or who knows what, which I don't know why you would, it's a Supra, but you could. So just be prepared for that as you do your brake job. Obviously we hung it up, so let's get the caliper out of the way and we'll continue along here in a moment. There we go. With luck, I'll be able to remove this and hold the rotor at the same time. There is certainly some frequency that you may have to drill that out. They are the softest steel known to man and can be very easy to strip. But there you go, that one's out, so that's good. And just like that, rotor's off. Pretend like I'm using a wire brush to, clean every bit of scale and rust off, and, someone will remind me that I didn't get all of it and I should have greased it and whatever. But everything looks fine. I'm guessing he did wheel studs here, but I don't know. They look fancy. I like wheel studs. There you go. That looks fine. I don't feel anything there. It's nice and clean and dry and free of debris. It's always a shame to get these dirty. Don't forget to line that up. The only thing that screw does is hold the rotor on the car while we get the caliper back over top of it. So it does not need anything other than to be snugged down. Otherwise, you may regret that the next time. Always looks good to see our lovely Girodisc logo there. GR Supra. Part number A1307. We got a couple more sets in stock if you want them. There's a production date, I'm betting, lot code, and minimum thickness is 34 millimeters. Very good, that looks fantastic. So we're going to reverse that. All right, that took a minute, but the caliper's back on. Google the torque's back on that because I don't know what it is off the top of my head. It's probably around 90 or so foot-pounds, but you should probably pay attention to that. So these pads should drop in. We did that before, so right there. And right there, if it happened. A little bit of, yeah. No, we're not putting any grease on these. That's not how that works. The damping coefficient of grease is 0. It's a lubricant, but everything is clean and dry. The pads move freely. They weren't too tight going in. They're going to move just fine. The good news is, without those counterweights, it's a little easier to get the pins in. Remember, they come in from the back side. Do a little tapping. You can hear that and tell right away when it's seated all the way. That one is all the way in. This one is giving me a little fun. There we go. Again. There, right away. Tell right away when that's seated. Double check. This little hold down spring can kind of move. Everything's in. That looks done. Rotor spins. We are good to go. We'll talk about bedding at the end, but let's go do the rear. A little bit more of a wrestling match back there. All right, so we won't subject you to the entirety of me fumbling around with a brake install, but the rear is a simple setup. There's no park brake drum. We talked about that when we looked at the rotors. So you see the same thing, the little hold down screw there. This is a single piston floating caliper. So we're gonna lever the caliper out. We gotta rotate the piston back since it's the electric e-brake style. Get that retracted. Then we'll take the caliper bracket off, pop the rotor, and reverse that. So we'll show you the first part because there's just a couple things we saw. So again, a couple things we noticed you might want to be worth seeing. So you just take out the top bolt. So that's perfect. I like that because, well, we can get those out in a minute, but we might as well pop them out. Those are about done. So we've got to get that piston back, you know, whatever normal new thickness is times 2, that's how much that has to go. Now you may not be able to see it so well, but this is typical. It's got the 2 detents to get one of these sort of universal type tools in there. For whatever reason, the posts on our tool that match the disc are kind of fit okay, but kind of don't. So it's a little bit of a wrestling match. Again, needle nose pliers might be easier, or some other, I mean, I've used channel locks, whatever, but basically we just got to turn that piston. And if I recall, Nate, it turns back righty-tighty. So it should be the right direction. I don't know, I'm sure you've seen one of these before. If not, you'll need to. So we wrestled with that for a minute. That piston is all the way spun back in. Another thing is to get to the bracket bolts. It's probably much easier if you just take the caliper out of the way. There's a whole bunch of crap in there, and so we're going to do it that way. Anyway, it's just 2 bolts. It's got to come off anyway. So there's a lot going on back there. You can kind of, looks like you can just, yep, I like it. You can just stick it back in there, and I may have to wiggle it out of the way to get to the bracket bolts, but same thing. So again, it's an E-torque, fine thread, takes a minute to get it out, but might be a torque to yield, probably worth looking up at some point. It's worth a change. Like I said, it's a little tight in there, but not really having a problem. All right, got them out. Make sure these clips stay in there. Those are the guide plates. You probably want to look at them. That's your pad hardware. That's what the pad slides. Again, we're not going to douse it in grease. Sorry, not sorry. Look at everything. Again, this is steel though, so those threads won't suffer. Ultimately, at some point, you would take these out and maybe re-grease them, etc. But car's new, everything's free and smooth. So we're just going to get off and running. Same story here. Get your hold down screw out. I will say that BMW beats GM on this one, because these actually feel like they work. The GM ones did not. Look at that pretty new disc. Again, same thing, it comes right off. No grease, just gonna free and clear, brush everything down, make sure it feels normal. Hub center's good. And we are in. No, you don't need to do anything to this. You put it on the car. Make sure your hole lines up. Have your hold down screw somewhere you can reach, as opposed to where you can't reach.
It's right there.
Kicked it. Yep, I see it. Snug, not tight. Here comes a little bit of a wrestling match to get these bolts started. Oh, look at this Veris. It's perfect for putting the bolt there. Those guys are smart. Everyone loves Veris, right? We can all agree on that. Yeah, that's what they do. So you can kind of try this for a minute to make that thread start. All right, so just remember the inner pad has the high protrusion on it, or else you'll repeat something. And again, those pads just kind of sit down in there inside the clips. Super easy. And we definitely did not let the caliper hang, or maybe we did, but there's like might a few things attached to it. But you get that sucker in position. And we have assumed the position. Again, make the bottom one. So there you go, we're about done. We're going to snug some things up, put it back together. We might do a bedding video, I'm not sure. Some people tell you it's 15 minutes to do all the brakes. It's not 15 minutes, but even with all this video shooting and kind of, I never even saw these brakes before almost, you know, we're maybe 2 hours in. So, you know, have all your right tools, be ready to go, and it should be a piece of cake, and we will have at it. Thanks for watching.